Welcome to the cutting edge of the global awakening.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex.
Well, it looks like the North Tower of the World Trade Center has just completely collapsed.
The U.S. dollar's status as the preeminent reserve currency is under attack.
This is a mathematical fact. Tens of trillions of dollars are being extracted from the United States of America.
You really want the truth? Then just follow the money.
Welcome to Follow the Money Radio, a broadcast dedicated to your personal, spiritual, and financial liberty. And now, here's your voice of reason in the midst of global chaos, economist and best-selling author, Jerry Robinson.
Friends, welcome to this week's edition of Follow the Money Weekly. So glad that you're joining us all around the world. You can find us online at followthemoney.com. Right there, we have lots of podcast archives, articles, videos, and downloads for you to check out. And we also have a very large members-only section for those of you who are looking for specific trading ideas each and every day, or whether you're looking for the Income University, which you're going to hear Justin Vanderveer talk about later on in the program today, our Income University filled with 22 different income streams that you can create both now and in retirement, videos, PDFs associated with teaching you how to turn on these various different income streams today. We live in a very dangerous economic time where most people don't have enough money. They don't have enough savings. They're certainly not preparing for retirement the way they should be. And so, in addition to paying down debt or lowering your overall costs, sometimes you just can't do that enough. Sometimes you need to make more money. You need to increase the amount of income that's coming into your life. Just like the government can raise taxes, right? They have that power. You have that power too. You can raise more money by opening up another income stream, right? So identifying something that maybe you can do. Well, we have our Income University there designed to help you to spur your thoughts, spur your imagination, to find those kinds of income streams that maybe you can add to help with you and your family. All right, so today we have a great show for you lined up. We actually have an interview with one of the world's best-known Christian leaders by far, Dr. David Jeremiah. He has written, I guess now with the latest book that he has out, 10 New York Times best-selling books. His latest is called, Is This the End? Signs of God's Providence in a Disturbing New World. So we're looking forward to having him on the program. Be a very interesting exchange that Dr. Jeremiah and I will have about, the time that we live in today. His book, of course, Is This the End? He's referring to end times theology according to the Bible, which is known as eschatology. But then he's also talking about, ways for the Christian to live in these times. In particular, one of the chapters that he tackles has to do with immigration and illegal immigration, which I think is a very important topic for the church to be addressing, not just Washington. And I should stress, especially for those of you who are new to our program, you're thinking, well, gosh, I thought this was a financial show. Why are you having a minister on to talk about his book? Well, in reality, when it all boils down, friends, the world is not just about dollars and cents, right? It's much more than that. But of course, that is really the area which we focus on. But, my background in particular, in addition to being an economist and a former financial advisor and a trader and an author and all of the things that I do today, when I studied at the university level, my interest was in theology and economics, the cross section between the two. And this is what I spent much of my time at the university focusing on, was this interesting cross of the two different ideas. I guess the intersection is what I should say. The intersection between theology and economics. Very fascinating. And in fact, much of my research led me to the 17th century and the 18th century, where you have the explosion, or I guess we should call it the reinvention of many of the Greek philosophies that permeated the 5th and 4th and 3rd century BC, that were revived in the Renaissance era. And especially, of course, here in the West, as we began to develop things like Adam Smith's book on the Wealth of Nations, and not just economics, but also many of the founding fathers appealing back to these ancient Greek philosophers. So much of my study has been in this area, and I've come to some very interesting conclusions that'll be released in an upcoming book. I'm actually writing 2 books today. Writing one that's a trading book. I've been working on it for many, many months. So those in our trading community know that I'm working on a trading book. And it's getting close. It's really quite an achievement for me to have put all of this into a book. I tell you, it's a lot of information, but I think it's going to be really great. So that when that book is available, we'll let you know. It's not available now. Neither of these books are available now. The other book that I'm writing has to do with this time period, specifically this Renaissance time period, as new ideas about the economy, new ideas about political theory are arising. And you'll hear some of those questions, I think, in my discussion with Dr. David Jeremiah later on in the program. So you'll kind of hear an interesting exchange, I think, maybe a different exchange than you've heard before in the past. And then, of course, we'll also be joined by Tom Cloud. He'll be here with an update on precious metals. And as I mentioned, Justin Vanderveer will be here with his Income University Minute. It's a new segment that we are doing, and he's slowly breaking us into this brand new segment. And I do appreciate Justin and his help on the Income University Minute. Stick around for that toward the end of the program. All right, so before we bring on our guest today, I want to talk a little bit about the brand new Trump presidency. Just real quickly, I want to just mention a few things. First of all, $22 billion flowed into U.S. stocks in the 3 days following the Trump election on Tuesday. This is pretty big. This is indicating that there's a lot of money that's been pent up on the sidelines. You know, there's been a lot of concern about the U.S. stock market underneath President Obama. There has been a lot of concern that the market is going to implode, that the market is going to crash. Mr. Obama has appeared tone deaf on some things, some issues as we look back, causing many people to wonder if the economy was really heading for a bad spot. And when we take a look at the official numbers that have come out of Washington, we see that there has been a tremendous amount of propping up of asset prices. This began back in 2008. And we continue to see this to this day. It seems as if the idea of a businessman in the White House, a Donald Trump, entering the White House in 2017, there seems to be, I guess, perhaps an optimistic belief that somehow he will bring sanity where there was previously insanity. We do believe that Trump will be good for the stock market because remember, the stock market is based upon earnings, and earnings are based upon, in many ways, business and consumer optimism and confidence that shows up in the actual transactions, right? So you actually have businesses going out and investing, or you have consumers going out and consuming. And that, of course, is what's supposed to drive stock prices. But when that fails, when businesses are not investing or when consumers are not consuming as much, the old Keynesian ideal of the government stepping in to serve as a buffer against weak demand. They step in, and of course, they can do several things. They can use fiscal policy, which we really haven't seen much of from Washington, or you can use monetary policy, and that's exactly what we've been seeing. We've talked about this several times on this program, is that there is a tremendous amount of monetary policy going on today, but a relatively small amount of meaningful fiscal policy according to the Keynesian model. So I think it's fair to say that Trump is going to be using fiscal policy, certainly trying to put more Americans to work. He's talked about investing in American infrastructure. This brings us back to ideas back from the past where we had big at-work programs by the government. Very possible we can see something like that underneath a President Trump now. We'll also be watching this Thursday when Janet Yellen, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, will be speaking before a joint economic committee. That happens on Thursday, and it'll be the first time that she's opened her mouth since Trump has won. It'll be very interesting to see what she has to say regarding the economy and to see if the tone has changed at all since the last time we heard her speak. Of course, if you look at the stock market over the last several days since the Trump victory, we've seen a tremendous move into industrial stocks and financial stocks. Industrial stocks, again, moving up because of, as we just mentioned, promises of perhaps infrastructure investment. One of the promises that Trump has made is that he will divert the money that is being currently sent by the U.S. to the UN for climate change investment. And instead, he's going to divert that back into the United States, into water infrastructure and other types of infrastructure. So that already is boosting stocks. But then on top of that, you have financial stocks. Now, why are financial stocks rallying on a Trump victory? Well, there's at least three reasons, and there's more than that. We could certainly, if we sat around and thought about it, but just the first three reasons that are the most obvious are A, you have soaring treasury bond rates right now as bonds are falling. as we move into this risk-on environment. You also have strong rate hike expectations in December from the Fed. Almost every economist now is expecting a rate hike by the Fed in December. And then also there is the prospect of President Trump repealing Dodd-Frank, right? Or seriously gutting it, or maybe even getting into, and we've also heard that the Fiduciary Act that had been passed on financial advisors that was to come into effect early next year, 2017, may also be gutted and or scrapped by the Trump presidency, by the Trump administration. So this is obviously taking a lot of pressure off of financial stocks. We enjoyed a really nice swing trade this week on Bank of the Ozarks, one of my favorite financial stocks, just one of my personal favorite ones. The ticker symbol is OZRK. We made a nice 16% on that one in just a few days as that stock rallied with financial stocks across the board on the Trump victory. Many of the banks, no doubt, are also giddy over the fact that the Basel IV capital requirements may not actually have staying power underneath a Trump presidency. So financial stocks certainly being unleashed and feeling a sense of relief now that Trump has won. We also saw a lot of healthcare stocks rising, mainly because Hillary Clinton had promised to go after biotech and healthcare sector for their price gouging on prescription drugs. Now that Clinton has been neutralized, that threat is really no longer present. And so many of these stocks, which had been selling off in anticipation of a Clinton victory, are now rebounding now that Trump has won. So there's been a lot of rotation in the markets. We've been covering all of that for all of our subscribers with our weekend briefing and also our Tuesday and Friday conference calls for those of you who are pro traders. If you're not currently part of our membership community, we greatly encourage you to do that if you're interested in learning how to make money in the markets. I think this is going to be a really interesting time to be involved in the stock markets as Trump takes the helm. We really do believe we're going to see a pretty big move up in stocks on a President Trump. Not straight up, and no doubt we will have challenges, but we think overall that it's going to be a continuation of the uptrend, if not much more aggressive, as much of the money that's been on the sidelines waiting for some sort of relief and some sort of certainty may now begin to step back in. And we have been very low on volume in the markets for, going back to the 2008 crash. We have just never seen the volume really return as people have been scared out of the market. So we'll see. We'll see if Trump can revive the animal spirits in the market and see if there can be a revival of more money into the market and see a renaissance, so to speak, in the stock market, because we really have been trading on low volume, lots of institutional volume, but mom and pop investors and normal day traders out there have been really pretty thinned out by all of the uncertainty in the market. Maybe that will change with Trump. All right, friends, stick around. On the other side of this break, we'll be right back with my interview with Dr. David Jeremiah, the author of the brand new book, Is This the End? Signs of God's Providence in a Disturbing New World. Hold tight. Hi friends, Jerry Robinson here from Follow the Money Weekly. According to a recent study, nearly 1 out of 3 Americans has no financial plan. Perhaps even more shocking, approximately 43% of Americans have never spoken to anyone about retirement planning. For most Americans, the problem isn't that they don't want to protect their family's financial future, but instead, it's that they lack the time to sit down and do the research to find a financial advisor that they feel that they can trust. That's why many years ago, I created the Christian Financial Advisor Network. The Christian Financial Advisor Network, or CFAN for short, is a nationwide network of faith-based financial advisors who fully understand and adhere to FTM Daily's powerful wealth-building philosophies, including our own 5 levels of financial freedom. When you contact the Christian Financial Advisor Network, one of our faith-based financial advisors will reach out to you within 72 hours and will provide you with a 100% free consultation. Whether you need specific investment advice, help with your retirement plan, or simply just have a question about your finances, The Christian Financial Advisor Network is here to assist you. With America's gargantuan debt crisis looming, isn't it time that you sat down with a trusted financial advisor to develop a blueprint for protecting your retirement nest egg, your family, and your financial security? Don't put off planning for your financial future any longer. Take the first step by logging on to ftmdaily.com/advice. If your goal is to achieve true financial independence, get started now by requesting a completely free consultation with a financial advisor in your area right now online. Simply go to ftmdaily.com/advice. All right, well, joining me on the line today is one of the best-known Christian leaders in the world. He serves as senior pastor of Shadow Mountain Community Church in Southern California and is the founder and host of Turning Point, a successful radio and television ministry. He's the author of more than 50 books, including the Jeremiah Study Bible and his latest, Is This the End? Signs of God's Providence in a Disturbing New World. His name is Dr. David Jeremiah. Pastor, thank you for joining us on Follow the Money Radio.
I'm honored to be with you.
It's great to have you back, and I want to pose the question right back to you about your new book. I certainly want to talk about it, but the provocative title, Is This the End? Sir, is this the end? Are we in the end?
No, I think give you a pretty clear answer to that. As far as I know, the answer is no, we're not at the end. I have to also admit that if we were, I would not be able to definitively tell you, because the end, as far as Christians are concerned, is the return of Jesus Christ and the rapture, and the Bible tells us that no man knows when that will happen. But we can watch the signs of the times, and we can discern some things that help us to know that the Lord's return is sooner than many people think.
Very interesting, very interesting. Now, you tackle the topic of immigration in this book, which I greatly admire, because you touch on such topics like these today, and it can be very dangerous. But I believe it's more important than ever in these dark times to actually be tackling some of these untouched topics. In the Old Testament, you talk about how God's people are instructed not to oppress immigrants. The Bible talks and actually equates oppressing foreigners with mistreating orphans and widows. And of course, when you look in the New Testament, we see an even clearer command to love all men. So based on your reading of Scripture, what is the proper response by Christians living in the 21st century to America's immigration debate?
Well, I'm not certainly portraying myself to be an expert on this, but here's the best reasoning that I can put forward. Number one, in the Old Testament, the way the Israelites were taught to teach the strangers among them is a picture of how I believe we are to treat those who come among us from the outside. And they were given three instructions. They were to assist them, they were to accept them, and they were to assimilate them. And I think we have done, the first two relatively well. I'm just thinking that in our current struggle, we haven't done the third very well. The assimilation of them would assume that they become part of our culture. In fact, interesting, in the Old Testament, the instructions that God would give to Israel, he would give that instructions, and then at the end he would say, and the same goes for your strangers and those who dwell among you from the outside. In other words, God expected those who came to live with Israel to live as a part of Israel and to be inculcated into their culture. That, to me, is where the issue is really being hardest fought in our culture today.
Now, let's move in, because your book is just filled with very intriguing topics that, again, as I mentioned at the outset, are often untouched. And the first half is called Is This the End for America?, where you really deal with the issues facing and confronting this nation. And then the second half is This the End for the World? In particular, you get into a topic of apathy and the apathy of America. And in this chapter, you talk about the foundation of America. One of the, I got a really interesting question the other day from a listener, because we talk about these topics occasionally. And one of the questions we received was, and I think this really reaches some of the people who are non-believers today. I think they're challenged by I think maybe even the American Revolution, because the question I received was that the American Revolution, when you really think about it, was the Anglican Church kind of infighting. You had England, which was a Christian monarchy, that pretty much just split apart and splintered. And so it was a lot of Christian on Christian violence. Are there any moral lessons to you from the American Revolution?
Well, I don't don't deal with that much in this book at all, in fact. But in our own culture, we've had more than a few of those kind of separations. I remember my father, who was very much a churchman, going through leaving the Northern Baptist Association, which was the church group that we were in at the time, because liberalism had slipped into the denomination, and the churches that were in it were all being kind of grouped together. And that's happened, as you know, in the Lutheran Church. It's happened in the Methodist Church. It's happened in the Presbyterian Church, where people who are in organizations that those organizations begin to move away from their original pinnings, and the people who believe in those things don't usually stay in the organization. They leave. And, I'm sure that's happening not just in our country, but around the world. And that's where the, like you said, Christian on Christian fighting happens, and it's very volatile, and it's not very pretty.
No, it's not. But when I think about the foundation of the country, sometimes, I mean, it's easy to see from a purely biblical perspective, if you read the words of Jesus, of course, as you teach, and as I believe, it may be difficult to reconcile the Jesus of the New Testament with some of the bloody revolution that America was born in, which again may inform the end of America, so to speak. I mean, every empire comes to its end. Could some of the problems we're facing be original sins from the very foundation?
Some of them are. A lot of it goes back to some very basic sins, which are the greed for wealth and power, and the willingness of people to do almost anything to not only acquire it, but to keep it once they have it. The Machiavellian model is very, very definitive about that you get power, you do whatever you have to do to keep it. We've just seen kind of a transfer of power here in our own country, and it was one of the most acrimonious contests we've ever had, because it almost felt to me like it was a fight for the soul of our country, and it was not pretty. And the same things that drove that in many ways, as far as motivations are concerned, were certainly present in the revolutionary conflicts as well.
I want to continue on in your book, because your book confronts other things as well as Israel, ISIS. You get into Russia, and then, of course, you also get into the eschatology, the final things, and you talk about the rapture of the redeemed. That seems as if it's a topic that really exploded in the late 70s, rooted in that dispensationalism. And then over time, we've seen variations and different opinions and all of this. Talk to us about your view of eschatology. What do you see, and I guess what camp do you fall in? I hate to put it that way, but just kind of help us understand your views.
I believe that the Bible teaches that there's going to be a return of Christ before the tribulation of 7 years, which takes place on this earth. So I would be a pre-tribulational rapturist. In other words, I believe that Christ is going to come and take the church out before the 7 years of tribulation, which are written about in Revelation 5 through 19, take place on earth. And as opposed to others who believe that the church is going to go through the tribulation and that we're perhaps in the early stages of it right now. I base that on clear exegesis that I believe I have reflected in that book, and the reasons why I believe that are pretty much laid out in the last chapter of the book, in the tribulation chapter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just pretty much a premillennial, pre-tribulational view, in essence, is laid out in the book. Yeah, there's so much bickering about that today, and I know that there's just so much bickering. It seems almost silly, to be at the very end of time and to be bickering about those types of things. But it sure is an argument. Let's also talk about this concept again of the nation itself. You asked the question: is this the end of America? What specifically do you think America has done wrong, or where have we gone wrong? What do you point to in the book?
Well, all of the cultures that have been destroyed, like Rome, Greece, others, they have not been pilloried from the outside. They've exploded from within because of their own lack of morality and principled living. Rome is a classic example, the greatest military regime in history up until more recent days, and yet Rome could not protect itself from itself, and because of its own immorality and lack of any kind of principles, it fell on its own sword. And you look at what's happened in America, and I, without getting too political, I look at just what's happened to us in the last 10 years. And that does not bode well for the future of this nation, because we're not going in the right direction. And given continuation of those philosophies, we might not have made it had God not intervened. And I believe we have a chance, kind of a reset, if you will, maybe to get back to some of the things that are part of who we are as a nation.
When you talk about the last 10 years, are you mainly referring to the homosexual agenda? I mean, what exactly are you referring to?
Well, we have lost ground on almost every issue that defines us as Christians. I mean, there's a whole chapter in that book on intoleration. The toleration of our country and its leadership is for everything except for Christians. Christians are now not perhaps openly persecuted, as you would think of from maybe Fox's Book of Martyrs, but Christians are stigmatized, they're stereotyped, they're marginalized. In one of the ways I describe it in the book, Christians are being squeezed, and the persecution of Christians around the world is at an all-time high, greater than all of the previous times if you put them all together. So over these last years, we have seen the sanctity of life assaulted and almost made a non-topic because everybody is so certain that it is where it is and it's not going to change. And marriage, of course, has been greatly devalued, and the Supreme Court and the decisions about religious liberty are staring us in the face. And so I told somebody the other day, we've gone from worrying about the sanctity of life, now we have to have discussions about the sanctity of bathrooms. I mean, that's kind of like where we are. And so, you know, if we continue on this downward spiral away from God, away from any principles of morality upon which the nation was founded, we can't expect any different result than the nations that have gone before us. Even our lack of a positive and clearly elucidated relationship with Israel does not speak well of our future.
Okay, well, and sir, with all due respect, though, isn't it somewhat true that the path we're on perhaps is due to the type of government we have and the fact that we do have a representative democracy where the majority, through that representative democracy, can exercise their rights, whether they be good or whether they be evil? I mean, isn't this sort of inherent in an evil world in the last days with a democracy or a representative democracy?
Well, I think we've had a good illustration of that in the last election. You know, I spent almost the last year and a half running around the country with one single message. If you're a believer, if you're an evangelical, you owe it to yourself and to your faith and to your future and to your family to vote. In the last election, 25 million evangelicals who were registered did not vote. Yes, we're a representative democracy, but if people don't get represented, it's not going to go very well. And this year in the election, more evangelicals voted than any other time in history. And they were able to make the point they wanted to make. They wanted a change. They wanted something different. They wanted an opportunity to hope that maybe something could be better than what it is right now. And in the democracy, the way you do that is you go and vote. But if you don't vote, you got nobody to blame but yourself. I mean, I'm not sure where you're headed with that question, but the best I can understand is that, yes, we do get to participate in the decisions, but that only works if we participate.
Well, definitely true. The point I was making is more of the system itself. It's almost designed where if you have a people who are increasingly evil, as it says the last days will be, but then you also have a system that says they can have what they want through the ballot box. It's almost inherent in that system to have problems and for it to get worse, not better.
Yeah, that's why one historic writer said that a democracy can never last more than 200 years because it cannot last beyond the period of time when the members of the democracy itself figure out how to vote money to their own purposes, and then it falls on its own greed. That's where we have been. That's where we are. We are already past the 200-year mark, and so I think what you're saying is some of this may seem to be somewhat inevitable because of the nature of a democracy itself.
And the nature of man, you know, and of course the last days. Let's think about that for just a moment. We're in our final moments here with, by the way, David Jeremiah, my guest, Dr. David Jeremiah. The book is called "Is This the End? Signs of Divine Providence in a Disturbing New World." Fascinating discussion here with Pastor Jeremiah. We only have a few minutes left, sir, and I want to be respectful of your time. Let's go back and think about this particular topic because I mean these are the types of questions I think that many of the unbelievers are grappling with. And I received these questions here even at our own website and through our radio show. And some of them include things like this. I just got this email the other day from a topic we were discussing. Someone saying, basically, if I understand this properly, that if I enlist in the United States military as a Christian, I am under obligation by the state to shoot other fellow Christians to defend a Muslim's right to worship Allah or for a transgender's right to use the bathroom that he wishes. That's what I have to do. And I have to be willing to possibly kill a fellow Christian in another uniform. I think some people are beginning to question the validity of this, especially in the face of the coming kingdom of God. I mean, certainly we would hope that, and we read in the Bible that God's kingdom is coming. But it seems as if that the systems we're creating just kind of don't make a lot of sense.
Well, and one of the hard things, as you know, you deal with these questions all the time. The question that was postulated is certainly clear at the edge of a reasonable assumption of what could happen. And even if it is, it's stated in such a way, I'm not sure how you would ever answer that and bring clarity to anything or anybody. The issue is, you don't have to do anything that you don't believe is a part of God's will for your life. The Bible says you obey God rather than man. If you get yourself in a situation where you believe you're supposed to do something that is not according to your conscience as a follower of Christ, you don't do it, no matter what the circumstance might be. I get the thing they're trying to get at and all of these different things that are tugging at the soul of our nation. But I don't really think we resolve anything by coming up with these hypothetical questions that really it's kind of like Rubik's Cube. There's no answer. What do you say to that? What I say is, look, if you're in the Army and they say we're going to go against our other Christians and we're going to shoot them in order to protect the right for people here to disobey the law that we believe is the law of God in our heart, don't do it. Walk away from it. If you get in trouble, you get in trouble. I mean, in the New Testament, you have those issues where the question is it right to obey God or to obey man? And hopefully you can do both, but if they come into conflict, God wins every time.
It certainly seems the American God is not nearly as jealous as the Hebrew God, because the American God, it does seem, is okay with any false god. I mean, even inscribed there, Emma Lazarus's poem, or the New Colossus on the Statue of Liberty, where it invites everyone in. Here's
the deal. We are made in God's image, and that should be what controls where we go. But the problem we have in our culture is they have come back and they've made God in their image. So now they have their own God that makes them comfortable with what they're already going to do. And I have people all the time coming up to me if I preach a message on judgment, which, sometimes you do because it's in the Bible. People come up and say, well, my God would never do that. And I gladly tell them that they're absolutely right, because their God does not exist. He's a creation of their own mind, of their own desire.
Wow.
God is who he is, and you don't get a chance to remake him after the way you want to live. But that's what's gone on in our country and continues to go on in our country today, because people won't stand up and speak the truth. The God that everybody talks about that won't do this and won't do that never has existed and never will.
Thank you so much, David Jeremiah, my guest today. In our final moments, David, I just wanted to ask you to comment on one sentence that you had in your book, and that states on page 96, you state, while political freedom is to be cherished, we must remember that it is not the greatest freedom. In our closing moments here, would you share with our audience what that greatest freedom is to you?
The greatest freedom that we have is the freedom from guilt and the freedom from the penalty of our sin. And that freedom was bought for us through the precious blood of the Lord Jesus Christ, who gave his life for ours, who took our penalty so that we wouldn't have to pay it, and in doing so set us free from the penalty of sin. When we put our trust in him, we will never, ever, the Bible says, there is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. So I would suggest that while we may have to have these very vibrant discussions about human freedom, the greatest freedom is the freedom God wants everyone to have, and that's the freedom from the guilt and penalty of their sin. And he's paid the way through the death of his son on the cross. And when you're free that way, you're free indeed.
That's the voice of Dr. David Jeremiah. He is on the heels of 9 consecutive New York Times bestsellers, and I understand the pre-sales of Is This the End? Signs of God's Providence in a Disturbing New World, his newest book, is far outperformed all of your previous titles. So congratulations, sir, on all the hard work you've been putting into your ministry. I know that many people are blessed by you, and I want to ask it for those who want to find out more about you and how they can learn about your book, where should they go?
DavidJeremiah.org. It's real simple. Exactly like they're spelled in the Bible, .org.
Nice and easy.
All right.
Thank you, sir, so much. I appreciate your time today.
You bet. Thank you.
Follow the Money Weekly presents your precious metals market update. Here's Tom Cloud.
Hello, this is Tom Cloud with this week's Precious Metals Market Update. Let me start off by saying I'll do the video today. I will not be doing one next week, the week of Thanksgiving, as we'll be visiting with our children and grandchildren and be out of town. But we'll be back in 2 weeks for another video. But I want to jump right in. We've had some questions. There's not a lot going on in the market. It just stuck in a small trading range after the drop right after the election as people wait to see. But I did want to answer some. I've had questions pouring in both by telephone and by email, and I want to deal with a couple of them that it'll help all of us. You know, number one is the dollar yesterday, day before yesterday, hit a 14-year high. Now, everybody knows from economics, the more valuable our dollar gets, the less exports American companies can send out because they become unaffordable, become cheaper in other currencies, and then more expensive. And so you can't have your cake and eat it too, so to say. If we continue to have the dollar strengthening, then we're going to have big trouble with our trade deficit. And personally, I think, as I've said before, while I'm happy Trump's in there and has an opportunity to turn a lot of things around, we still have to realize his background is debt. He likes to borrow money and leverage, and certainly he'll do that. And some of the economists are estimating that he'll run the 2 biggest deficits the next 2 years in world history, higher than any deficit that Obama ran. Now, of course, when you're trying to rebuild the military, you're building up the VA hospitals, you're dealing with infrastructure issues. Certainly, if you're going to do all that, you're not going to have the tax revenues to cover it for a couple of years when you drop the tax rates and companies start expanding and adding jobs slowly, not fast. So it's not an overnight thing. But personally, I think the dollar is going to come back down significantly over the next 2 years. And we also have seen China has a lot of trouble with debt right now. But remember, we're the biggest debtor, not China, that's 4.5 times bigger a population. We have more debt than China, much more debt than China with our $20 trillion debt. So don't get caught up and buy that because, like I said, this is temporary as people move to safety. The bond market has been shellacked, and the gold market has too, since Obama got in there. And we've seen the stock market move to an all-time high, and yet the stock market is still only up 70% for the last 16 years, while gold is up still 520% over that same period of time. So nothing has changed except for the short term. So watch the dollar. We still expect, because it's hard to believe gold is still up over 12.5% this year, and the dollar now is back where it started. It's made up 4% in a little over a week, and yet it's still back, and gold is still up, which is unheard of. So we like that, the strength of gold, the way it's held. The next issue has been, do I think that a Republican president, House of Representatives, and Senate will vote to finally let us know how much gold we really have in Fort Knox? Now, certainly that's still out there. I can't tell you one way or the other. I would like to think that's a true statement, but certainly there's no evidence out there. Just because the Republicans are in charge of all the houses doesn't mean they're going to tell us how much gold we have in Fort Knox, if any, as some people think, or if we all have it all there, what we're supposed to have. So I can't answer that one except to say it may or may not. But the next one, certainly they're saying what happens to gold during a recession and an economic worldwide contraction. If we have a recession worldwide, remember in 2015 we had a 6% drop in the GDP. Even though the U.S. had slightly over 1%, the world had a 6% GDP drop. And certainly 2016 is going to be a GDP drop. Once again, the U.S. will have a very small growth, but we don't have those numbers yet, and we won't until February or March of 2017. But what happens to gold in economic contractions? We go back to the great one, 1929 to 32. We saw gold go from $20 to $32, 60%, while everything else, the stock market crashed 80%. And look at 2008. Gold was the only investment on an index that went up. Silver went down 28 or 9%. Stock market 38%, and gold went up 8%. Gold is a phenomenal deflationary hedge as people move to it because it's real money and they don't know what they're going to do, how much money they're going to print to come out of an economic contraction, how much will the world allow to be printed in this day and time. And then we see the release of the two people that Trump is turning to for economic advice. And I sent out an email last week to all of our clients that she wants a gold-backed standard to get credibility in the U.S. again and to make us great again economically and see these deficits start contracting and disappearing. So we could have, and the ones of you that are holding gold will have an economic free fall that you won't believe, because the numbers being thrown around are 5,000 to 12,000 per ounce that you would get by going to a gold standard. And people say, oh, they would never let you do that. Remember, there's only 2% of Americans that own gold, so they don't care if 2% make a free fall profit. And I really think there is going to be a time that those holding gold will win and get a free fall profit by having gold in their portfolio. Now, what percentage is a different story. You may cut back right now or buy less until you're more certain what's going to happen, but you still have a basis of 10% of your net worth, which includes your IRA, 401k, and your personal investments. I'm not talking about cars or homes. So these are the three main questions we had this week. For the ones that are looking for a self-directed precious metals IRA, call us and we'll walk you through how you do that and get a custodian. We can function as your broker and representative, but we cannot function as your custodian. And you can call us at 800-247-2812. And you can talk to Dan or Kathleen or myself, and we can help you get that in place by that. And you can also call us if you have any questions. We'd be happy to go over those with you. With this week's Precious Metals Market Update, this is Tom Cloud signing out.
Hey friends, this is Jerry Robinson from Follow the Money Weekly. Recently, we have been receiving many emails from our listeners commenting on the great help they're getting from our precious metals expert, Tom Cloud. Gold and silver are excellent hedges against the growing threat of coming U.S. inflation. Who's your gold guy? Make it Tom Cloud. With over 30 years experience with precious metals, Tom will answer all of your questions. Don't buy your gold and silver through some call center and pay inflated prices. Call my good friend Tom Cloud and speak directly with him and get all of your questions answered. For a limited time, Tom is offering free shipping and insurance on every gold and silver purchase made by our listeners. Call 800-247-2812. 2812. And when you do, tell him that Jerry Robinson from Follow the Money Weekly sent you, and he'll throw in that free shipping and insurance on your entire order. Call your gold guy, Tom Cloud, right now for the very best deals on gold and silver coins. 800-247-2812. That is 800-247-2812.
Are you prepared for the next stock market crash? It's not too late to protect yourself and your family with Jerry Robinson's best-selling book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, now in a new audiobook format. Whether you want to listen in the car, at the gym, or on your iPad, we've got you covered. Get the entire 300-page book in audio format for only $24.95. That's over 12 hours of Jerry Robinson's economic wisdom, financial insights, and practical money-making strategies for only $24.95. Inside this new audiobook, you'll learn 21 profitable income streams you can create both now and in retirement, along with unique tips on how to inflation-proof your investment portfolio using our own PACE philosophy. And our 5 levels of financial freedom, which is Jerry Robinson's personal blueprint for building true wealth. If your goal is to become a better investor, increase your income, or just understand what is really happening in the global economy, you cannot afford to miss out on the vital information that is jam-packed into this 12-hour audio book. Get instant access to Bankruptcy of Our Nation in audio format right now by going online to www.ftmdaily.com/bankruptcy. That's ftmdaily.com/bankruptcy. Download your copy today and get on the fast track to true wealth and a lifetime of financial security.
I'm Justin Vanderveer with this episode of Income University Minute. In Income University Episode 3, we address the importance of our focus. How are you dealing with fear? In Texas, a group of investors is planning for a doomsday event by building an underground luxury community costing $300 million. They want to not just survive, but be able to sustain themselves independently from the outside world. What about you? How will you survive what may not be a doomsday event, but, for example, dealing with loss of your primary income stream? For answers on how to expand your streams of income, go to followthemoney.com. Then connect with FTM's Income University by becoming an FTM Insider. Go to followthemoney.com/income. Once again, to join like-minded people in the FTM Insider community, go to followthemoney.com/income. If you are already an FTM Insider, then go to your FTM Insider member homepage to access Income University. For Income University Minute, I'm Justin Vanderveer.
Friends, and that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much for choosing to allow us into your life each and every week right here on this broadcast. And as always, I leave you with this final word, this time a quote by William Penn, an early English Quaker leader and colonist, when he said, "Truth often suffers more by the heat of its defenders than the arguments of its opposers." And that's just something to think about. Remember, friends, when you want the truth about the global economy, just follow the money. Have a safe and prosperous week, and we'll see you right back here next time. Until then, God bless.
All of the information contained on the Follow the Money podcast is strictly for informational and educational purposes. It should not be construed as specific investment advice. The views and opinions of our guests and sponsors, including Tom Cloud, are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of FTMDaily.com or Robinson Media Group, LLC. Jerry Robinson does hold an insurance license and at times may offer consulting on life insurance and fixed retirement income products. Follow-up, individualized responses to email or phone requests that involve the rendering of personalized investment advice for compensation will not be made absent compliance with state investment advisor registration requirements or an applicable exemption or exclusion and applicable insurance regulations. Past performance is not indicative of future results. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on the podcast. Remember, never do your financial planning through podcast or radio. It's your money. Be wise. Do your due diligence and always consult a trusted financial professional before making